Uh, I'll just take a second. I left my notes outside. All right. So we have 2-3 discussions to do, and then we go into agriculture. And I will give you 2 questions today, and you try thinking over those 2 questions on the uh, contracted weekend that I have given you this week. You know, normally I would have given you a Saturday and Sunday, but then in Diwali I will be, and Diwali for optional students, I'm keeping it as 23rd is Sunday anyways, and then 24th and 25th, because I don't want to see you with a hangover on 25th. So, so no, I don't have a hangover. I'm a teetotaler. I'm talking about you here. So in that case, so 25th, I'll give you an off, and due to that only I'm pushing you on these 2 Saturdays. That if we have covered on that, then we are in a good zone. So that is how we will go. Now, the method, because since we have done 4 or 5 sessions, 2 things on that. One is that gradually, but I will be starting to increase the pace a little. So be ready to brace it up. All right, 4-5 classes हो गई, हंकी डोरी अच्छी सारी बात हो गई है. अब आप मुझे पहचान गए हो, मैं आपको थोड़ा पहचान गया हूँ. All right, so in that case now, be prepared that gradually I'll not increase it a lot. I never increase a lot of speed in my teaching, but gradually I'll increase it a little bit. So if you're writing on an average 4 or 5 pages in a class, we will make it something like 6, 7 in the class in which the notes is not used. Like today we will use a lot of notes, so obviously you will not have to write much in that. Secondly, that whatever you did this week, like Monday to today, give it another go, and again just try familiarizing yourself with the data sets and all that you have in front of yourself. If a question is asked from here, 2 types of question can be asked. I combined both of them, all right, when I was teaching you. One can be analytical question. Analyze why there was a slowdown, all right, analyze why there was a recovery. That kind of a question can be asked. Another type can be simply asking you the trend of GDP from 51 to 91, trend of per capita income from 51 to 91, trend of industrial growth 51 to 91, or sometimes they can make it bad the way they did it 2 years back when they said that compare the development of consumer goods and capital goods industry in the pre-liberalization phase. That is why if you will see in every time period, I have been giving you that this was the rate of consumer goods growth and this was the rate of capital goods growth. So in that case, if they ask you such questions, then in any case, you will have to rely on the data set and answer. If they ask you an analytical question, analyze and answer, then data set is not important. Then you can answer with less data used, but without data, again, your answer will not make lot of sense, but you can answer it with less data used and putting more analysis into it. So that is the way you should plan yourself. Now today, what I plan to first begin with you is talk to you about quickly, we will not spend a hell lot of time, but some time, on India in 1991. Like India till 1990 is what we had covered yesterday. India in 1991. And what we will do in that is we will try understanding the reasons of crisis. So we will not go into the reasons of, into the economic reforms part. That I will do with you when I teach you India after 91. But we will just keep it till reasons of economic crisis and then what was the crisis. So we will take it till the crisis of 91. And second thing then after that, which is where again I will not use your notes, I will be teaching you the evolution of occupational structure in India from 51 to 91. This is again a question that they ask us, that how did occupational structure evolve from 1951 to 1991. So we will again try answering that okay, and not only occupational structure, but even economic structure, overall, the income structure also. These 2 evaluations we will do, and then we will go into saving investment gap. From there onwards, you won't have to write much because it's all in your notes, and I don't want you to write anything extra, barring some small analysis of certain time periods. All right, but barring that, there is nothing much you need to write in those. And agriculture, 90% of things are there in your notes, so you won't have to write much. For this part, I actually want you to use the notes as synopsis of what we did in the class. Like you would have seen that what you do in the notes, there is a lot more I have done in the class compared to that, because notes are to give you a basic synopsis, but then there are few things in the notes like import substituting industrialization. So read through that, see that how you can inculcate things, internalize it. So these are few small things I've given you in the notes just to make sure that you have some reading part for these topics where I did not deliberately go into details in the classroom. But in case they ask you a 150-word question on import substituting industrialization, then you know that the meaning is that we will produce everything in our own country, but then how you will present an answer and what are the pros and cons and all, you see it here. To some extent, I will be, not to some, but to a great extent, I will be touching import substituting industrialization when I'm teaching you international economics. In international economics, we do a debate. Import substituting growth versus export-led growth happening in the world between 1951 to 1981. So there were countries like India, countries like Pakistan, countries like Argentina, countries like Brazil. These countries were following import substitution. And then there were countries like Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, which were following export promotion, Hong Kong. So we will make a comparison there. So there I will tell you about import substitution in any case. But you can read through from here. Now, when we talk about, first of all, when we say economic crisis of 1991, so this economic crisis was a balance of payment crisis. Not having enough foreign exchange reserves. This economic crisis was a balance of payment crisis, not having enough foreign exchange reserves to pay for imports and for short-term foreign loans. This was the challenge of 1991 economic reforms. Perfect, Aditya. And good afternoon, all of you who have joined me now. All right. So this is about BOP crisis that we look at. All right. This is the BOP crisis that we look at. So let's see. And what is a BOP crisis? When you don't have enough foreign exchange reserves to pay for your BOP deficit. When you don't have enough foreign exchange reserves to pay for your BOP deficit, then you say, I have a BOP crisis. All right. जब आपके पास foreign exchange नहीं होता अपने BOP deficit के लिए pay करने को, तो आप कहते हो आप BOP crisis में हो. और जिनको भी BOP नहीं पता, वो macro की NCERT जल्दी उठाएंगे. All right. So let's see this. And balance of payment, otherwise is what I'm saying. When I use the word BOP, it is balance of payment. The transactions record between people in the country and people outside. Now see, when we talk about 91 reforms, you write there, reasons for economic crisis. Reasons for economic crisis. And you write, 1, very high fiscal deficit, very high fiscal deficit of both central and state government. Very high fiscal deficit of both central and state government. Now see, and let's build it up. I'm assuming that at least you would remember this much, that fiscal deficit is the borrowing requirement of the government. When we use the word fiscal deficit, it is the borrowing requirement of the government. Of course, it's much more, but for the time being, you keep it as that. Now think, and I'll give you some numbers, I'll make you write it also, but understand it. Now, central government had a fiscal deficit of 8.4% of GDP, and state government had a fiscal deficit of 4.2% of GDP. Essentially, then, it meant that central and state government fiscal deficit was going above 12% of GDP. Now, you tell me this. If government borrows more from the market, then will that result in more liquidity or less liquidity? Absolutely, less liquidity. किसी के मन में lower liquidity, less liquidity नहीं आ रहा? You're not mixing it up? Perfect. And why will it lead to less liquidity? Because how do you borrow? You borrow from the savers. Savings are a given amount. From that given amount of savings, if the government takes away, the money, then obviously the amount of money left for private sector to borrow, etc., will be lesser. Now that is your less liquidity if government borrows more. And if government borrows more and there is less liquidity, that will mean interest rate will start rising. And if interest rate starts rising, then it becomes costlier for private investors to make investment. As in, if I have to buy a house, if I have to buy a factory, if I have to buy a machine to expand myself, then these buyings will be dependent on what? The borrowings I take and then invest. But these borrowings have become costlier, so my loans have become costlier and my investment therefore becomes costlier. It will discourage me from investing. That is exactly what we call crowding out. When I will teach you monetary policy, I'll bring it across again. Monetary policy, I'm saying it with all, again, conviction. Because when you study monetary policy, in macro also you will study it, you have to understand, many of you would already know that if government borrows more, that means government will issue more bonds. And if government issues more bonds, then bond supply is higher. And if bond supply is high, then bond price will fall. And if bond price falls, then bond yields will rise. So interest rate will rise. All right. So technically speaking, that is the way we should talk in economics. All right. But for the time being, since we have not done macro at the moment, so I'll keep it simple. I'm just connecting it to general liquidity, saying that if government borrows more, then liquidity becomes high. And if liquidity becomes low, and if liquidity becomes low, then cost of borrowing will rise for the private sector, resulting in discouraging investment. I can believe this can stay with us. Now, understand this, the connected point to it. The connected point to it is that, and that is what we call crowding out. Now, the connected point to it is government expenditure will not necessarily crowd out. You can have high government expenditure, and you can have high government expenditure on building roads. You can have high government expenditure on electrification. You can have high government expenditure on, say, educating people and skill development. You can have high government expenditure on storage capacity creation. Or if the government spends more on all of these, will it increase cost of doing business or will it reduce cost of doing business? Reduce. And will it then encourage the firms to enter the market or discourage them? Encourage them. And that is crowding in. So remember, it is not necessary that all government expenditure will only crowd out. It will crowd out, but then it can crowd in. All right? I again repeat, in case you missed something, I am saying that high government expenditure will lead to high fiscal deficit, and fiscal deficit will mean your interest obligations are high. Now, if your interest obligations are high, higher interest payment in the market, then private sector borrowings will become costlier. And if private sector borrowings become costlier, then that will mean it will discourage them from investing, like buying a house, buying a machine, setting up a new factory, etc., because their opportunity cost of money has become higher. And this is what we call crowding out. I am then saying that it is not necessary that all government expenditure has to crowd out private investment. Some crowding out will always happen, but government expenditure is also on making roads, It can also be on developing electrification. So you can have a cold storage chain network or mechanization in various areas. It can also be on developing education, healthcare. It can also be on development of storage facilities. Now, all these things reduce the cost of doing business in any economy. And that then encourages the firms to produce more. So government expenditure can have a dual impact. They can encourage the firms to produce more and they can discourage the firms from producing more. All right? तो मैं समझाना बस ये चाह रहा हूँ कि सरकार के खर्चे बढ़ने से हम ये ऑटोमेटिकली कंक्लूड नहीं कर सकते कि प्राइवेट एक्सपेंडिचर क्राउड आउट ही होगा. वो क्राउड आउट भी हो सकता है और क्राउड इन भी हो सकता है. Till here we understand the point? Now, then what kind of expenditure were we doing in 1980s? That becomes the question mark. So the expenditure we were doing in 1980s were a lot wasteful in nature. Wasteful in what sense? We were spending on poverty alleviation, but we were not targeting well. And that meant that people were not being uplifted, but expenditure was going on. Now that means one example of a wastage. Another example of a wastage can be you are making roads, but the roads are getting wiped out during monsoon. That's again an example of a wastage. Your output is not increasing as much as you would like it to be. All right, and that means again wastefulness. Another example of wastefulness can be, expenditure of that can be that government is spending on public administration, but that public administration is not exactly reaching people. You understand that policing is there and you have more established government offices, but then the offices are not helping people getting uplifted. So a lot of expenditure was, and then some wastages happen in our country for the sake of it. For example, you start a project, for some reasons you forget you have to complete it, and the project goes on, and then the delays happen, and the cost of completing the project goes high. You can take a place here. We have some spaces here. All right. So that is what it does, that when you talk about government expenditure, in 1980s, a lot of government expenditure was not helping us. In fact, if you recall, some of you would have surely read this statement that Rajiv Gandhi ji, our then Prime Minister, had said this, that out of 100 rupees we are spending, only 14 rupees is reaching the poor. So 86 rupees are wasted. You understand that? So that was the wastefulness. Sometimes the wastefulness is because of faulty planning. You design a project and then the designing is not correct and faulty planning leads to wastage. So there is a theory which all of you should keep in mind. Since I'm discussing government expenditure, I'll quickly give you an input on that. When I'm teaching you fiscal consolidation, then I will talk again on this. But understand this theory that expenditures are done in 4 ways. There are 4 types of expenditures and income sources. So one is when you spend your income on yourself. So if you are spending your income on yourself, you will be very conscious that you don't waste any rupee of it, because it's your income after all, you value it, and you will be very conscious that you get the best product out of it, because you are buying it for yourself. So both consciousness are high. Income should not be wasted and product should be of a great quality. The second possibility is you spend your income for somebody else. In that case, income is yours, so you will still be very careful that you should not be wasting it. But now it is for somebody else, so maximum, effort to get the best possible, it just might be lacking a little. For example, if you have to buy a t-shirt for yourself, you might go through 30 different t-shirts before you choose one. If you have to buy it for me, maybe 5 will be enough. You'll say, okay, sir will look okay in this, give it to him. That's okay. And I'm not saying, and again, don't bring value judgment, it will clutter your mind. Don't say, नहीं हम ऐसे थोड़े ही हैं सर, हम तो सबके लिए 20-20 देखते हैं. तो अब बहुत टाइम है आपके पास. But jokes apart, what I'm trying to tell you by this is that human consciousness works a lot in any case when it says it's your money and your commodity. So then we are conscious. My money and commodity for somebody else, we are conscious no doubt, but we know that okay, the commodity has to go to somebody else, so we can be a little casual. Then comes the third type. Somebody else's money, but the expenditure will be on you. Somebody else's money, but the expenditure will be on you. In that case, again, you are conscious you get the best product, but how much money should be spent for that best product, you are okay with it. Somebody else's money. For example, government has to take a decision on how much protection should be given to the government officers, to the government politicians. Now it is somebody else's money, but it has to be spent on me. I will be conscious that it should be spent in the best possible way, best facilities should be available, but there can be compromise on the budget because I know that money is not mine. And again, remember, these things are not consciously realized. These things are always in the subconscious of the humans. The fourth and the worst situation is somebody else's money to be spent by me on somebody else. Now, end of the day, that's the job of the government. They take somebody else's money and they have to spend on somebody else. Now, in that case, unless there is a decent check and balance in my system, and that is what is the key. That doesn't mean that government should not be allowed to spend or take tax. No. It only means that we know that government will not be always very efficient in choosing projects because it's not their money. You know, I have a proposal, and I'm just putting it to you that we can put it in public domain also. I was planning to write a blog on that. I'm not finding time. So my blog post is remaining empty these days. Maybe I can put a Twitter post on it. That all those people who say that we should give free laptops and we should give free televisions and we should give, and so on, you know, we should, again, don't confuse it with free education. In economics, there is something called merit goods. We have already done that discussion in public sector. So with merit goods, you're not doing that discussion. But laptops given for 2 years are no merit goods because third year the laptop's life is over and now you are leaving the student again without a laptop. So either create a system where, where when the laptop gets over, the fellow gets replaced by a new one. If that doesn't happen, then you are only doing some political parlance. Television is even worse, you know, because television doesn't satisfy anybody's social upliftment. Even though there was an article I read in the newspaper which was saying that was written by a DMK spokesperson, so it's understandable. Political parties take that role, but it was saying that if you give television, then it results in reducing domestic violence. Now, you know, I mean, this is ridiculous. आप बीवी मारते हो, आप टीवी ले जाओ. I mean, या अगर wife husband को मारते हैं तो उनको टीवी दे दे. I mean, wife beating or husband beating means that the person needs to be treated. उनको टीवी देने से बात नहीं चल पाएगी. You know, कि अच्छा आप टीवी देखिए, दूसरा entertainment का source देखिए, ये गलत है. You know, you can't do that. So this is ridiculous. But in India, we have already gone beyond ridicule in some circumstances. So coming back to my point, so if anybody who says we will give television and we will give laptops and we will give free money to people, just a small proposal. Even when you are in opposition and you are promising it, do it as a pilot project over 5 districts of the constituency in which you are proposing it from your own party fund. Don't use public money, use your own party fund. There is huge party fund that you have, and you do it and show that, look, even when I am not in governance, I am willing to help people using my party fund. Nobody will come forward then. You know, remember humans, अगर तुम्हें मेरी बात अभी भी अजीब सी लग रही है ना कि ये क्या own money, others money, I can give you a very easy example. Some of you, many of you rather, would have come out of your homes and be staying here in a hostel. Now, it is still not your earned money, but that money is given to you and you are told it is your money. Suddenly the consciousness in spending it becomes better. घर पर जब हम थे तो हमारी फरमाइश अलग हो सकती थी. We could have said different things to be purchased, and if suppose parents would have said, no, it can't happen today. Why it can't happen? Why are you refusing? I want it today. अरे एक चाउमीन ही तो मंगाने को कह रहा हूँ. You know, all that. The same chowmin, you have the money in your pocket, but you might be postponing it for another day. And think of it, it is not yet your earned money. What will you start doing with your earned money? You know? So you got to be conscious that this is human endeavor, that where did the money come from and whom it has to be spent upon plays its own role in my decision making. And that is why I repeat, fiscal deficit becomes an issue because government has to spend this money, which is not coming from their own pocket, and has to spend on somebody else where they are not going to gain directly. And that is where populism grows. Populist tendencies increase because then government says, all right, I have to spend it nevertheless. So why not spend it somewhere where some gains can be mine? So then I can get some votes at least by this expenditure. I can please my constituency a little by this expenditure. But these talks have nothing to do with efficiency then. Because you are doing your expenditure to please people, get votes, not for making sure that you are making the best possible expenditure in the area. Please keep this discussion in mind, because this can explain to you that why we are still not making expenditures like investment in agriculture rather than going on subsidizing agriculture. अगर एग्रीकल्चर में इरिगेशन के ऊपर इन्वेस्टमेंट कर लें, लैंड लेवलिंग पे इन्वेस्टमेंट कर लें, वी कैन डू इन्वेस्टमेंट्स इन दीज एरियाज, इरिगेशन, लैंड लेवलिंग, क्रॉप प्रोटेक्शन, स्टोरेज ऑफ क्रॉप, मार्केटिंग फैसिलिटी, डिस्ट्रीब्यूशनल चैनल्स, transportation facility for the farmers. If we can do all that, then these things are today purchased by the farmers. It will reduce cost of doing business. And then you don't need to give farmers fertilizer subsidy, etc. because you have already reduced their cost of doing business. Now they can save money from their business, buy their inputs, do output production, and gain better. What will be the benefit of that? If the cost of doing business is low because of higher investment by the government, if cost of doing business is low because of higher investment by the government, productivity will rise, and farmers will not have to take too much of loans, mind you, which will mean that that agriculture becomes a low risk activity. But rather than that, what do? We will give a very high MSP, and we will give a very high fertilizer subsidy, and we will give a very high maybe electricity subsidy to the farmers, and then we say, oh look, we're trying to help the farmers. But then imagine, take fertilizer for example, who will use more fertilizers? The large farmer, because they have more field. And obviously then who will get more fertilizer subsidy? The large farmer. So targeting becomes bad in the structuring of subsidy itself. And it is not that I am the only person who knows this fact. ऐसा तो है नहीं कि मैं हिमालय से उतरा और बोला मुझे ये सच्चाई पता चली है वर्षों के तपस्या के बाद. This is a fact which is known to all of us. But we are not taking action. That is what I was telling you. Expenditure that can please my constituency better and that can get me some better benefits rather than what can get me efficiency. So be careful. That is the point I'm trying to make to you, that the objective should be kept in mind, but that doesn't happen. So fiscal deficit goes high. Understand the cause of it. If the high cause of fiscal deficit is capex, capital expenditure on productive activities, then that fiscal deficit may not create a lot of problems for us. But if the cause of the fiscal deficit is wasteful expenditures that don't reach the poor, etc., then that creates the headache. And a lot of fiscal deficit in 1980s in India was of that category. Do I believe I reach you on this? So you please take that down then. No, I told you that shift majorly to investments that can uplift people. And if you want to give subsidy, target it better. And how do you target it better? I'll teach you that. No, okay. So the question I'm answering is that when we talk fiscal deficit in India, do we talk entire fiscal deficit or only central government fiscal deficit? So normally in newspapers, etc., that you see is central government's fiscal deficit. But what should be considered is the total fiscal deficit, because finally it is the governance mechanism. So everybody's deficit has to be considered. So in India at the moment, that fiscal deficit is around 12% again, but at the 9% again. But right now it is a lot of capital expenditure also which is happening in India, but India has to pull itself up. We can't have 9% of GDP as fiscal deficit. That is not a central plus a state. But जो तुम अखबार में पढ़ते हो 6%, 5%, 4%, वो central government की fiscal deficit है. क्योंकि generally जो fisc है वो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट से डिसीजन होता है. जो फिस्कल सिचुएशन का डिसीजन है, दैट इज डिसाइडेड बाय वेयर डज द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट स्टैंड. ऑलराइट, तो इसलिए एक साथ नहीं पढ़ते क्योंकि स्टेट गवर्नमेंट के अपने अपने रिक्वायरमेंट्स हो सकती हैं. लेकिन जब तुम फिस्कल कंसोलिडेशन पढ़ते हो, when you are studying fiscal consolidation, when you are studying fiscal responsibility in India, then it is always a combined talk. Alright, there's a debt to GDP ratio. So debt to GDP ratio is always with center plus state. No, not necessarily. A developing economy will tend to have fiscal deficit even when governance is good. All right, because our consumption requirements, government expenditure requirements, developmental requirements will be high, and tax base cannot be that high. So for a developing economy, not having a fiscal deficit will be pretty surprising. All right. Let's see this. Then you write in that. You write high fiscal deficit in 1990, high fiscal deficit in 1990 was both due to central and state government, central and state government. In a bracket you write 8.4% of GDP for central government, 8.4% of GDP for central government, and 4.2% of GDP for state government. Close the bracket. Most of these expenditures, most of these expenditures were on populist activities, POPULIST, populist activities, and on subsidies which were not targeted well. Subsidies which were not targeted well. Populist activities, mind you, is nothing but activities which are done to please people rather than long-term gains. All right? Politics of populism, you might have heard that. हिंदी में उसको बोलते हैं तुष्टीकरण की राजनीति. That you are doing politics of populism, that you are doing a political system where you just want to make people feel happy, but you're not giving them any real gains. One question that one of your friend also asks me, that is electricity a merit good? Again, remember the context is important. If you are able to supply electricity at a cheaper rate to actual poor in your economy, it's a merit good. If you are able to supply electricity to small farmers in your economy, it's a merit good. But if you are supplying electricity for free to the rich in your economy, it's a non-merit good. So the beneficiaries make a huge difference in how the subsidies are being targeted. All right. In the same thing you write, this resulted in increasing crowding out, and therefore reduced the growth of capital formation in the economy. Crowding out and crowding in, the whole talk I will do with you when we are doing macro with ISLM curves. So I will be telling you what is crowding out and what can be possibly crowding in. So I'm not making you write what is crowding out right now. All right, we'll go into that, or crowding in. So right, for the time being, I hope you have understood it. That is the key factor. But I will be giving you a write-up on crowding out and crowding in, etc. when I'm teaching you macro, because then we will have the ISLM curves, so I can easily exposition it to you that what exactly is crowding out and how exactly crowding in can happen. All right. In the same thing, then you write. Now, the last line I made you write is that in the economic system, if government is spending on populist activity, so government is not doing any capital expenditure, and private sector is not doing any capital expenditure or reducing its capital expenditure because of crowding out. So your overall production capacity becomes lesser. All right, that is the problem part here. You write in the same point, it also led to increase in wastage of resources it's okay, this that kind of a day to day, increase in wastage of resources, comma, because several government projects remained delayed and high public administration expenditure was not bringing immediate efficiency benefits to people. Now I'll tell you what was what was the problem here. Wastefulness, take an example, and this is again a ridiculous story of India's development. We don't have phosphorus reserves, so we cannot make phosphorus fertilizer, or diammonium phosphate as we call it today. So phosphorus based fertilizers are not a possibility in India. We don't have the reserves. There was a strange idea passed in 1982 where some people brought it to the government that we will import bird droppings from Nauru. Nauru is an island in the Pacific. So we will import bird droppings from Nauru, and those bird droppings contain phosphate contents. We will use those contents from the bird droppings to extract them and then make fertilizers in India, which will be phosphorus fertilizers. And in those days, 1982, the government sanctioned this project for approximately 130 crore rupees. Factory was built, machines were purchased, bird droppings were imported, for extraction, and needless to say, the project did not pick up. Within 3-4 years, it was realized that not even 1% extraction is possible of phosphorus from the bird droppings that we are bringing in. So we are spending a lot and we are unable to produce much. The project was suspended, the company was closed down, and the factory was left to rot. That is wastefulness. कि आप 120 करोड़ की फैक्ट्री बनाते हो, मशीन लगाते हो, फिर कुछ नहीं करते उसका, रह जाता है वैसे ही. You're doing nothing with it. Now that kind of wastefulness cannot help us. And that is what we were doing. In some instances, we end up doing that even now, but this is one example I told you. Then I'm sure many of you would have already read about it, and I will teach you that our insolvency laws were pretty weak. So since our insolvency laws were weak, it meant that if a company went bankrupt, again it took years before its capital could be used. And that became wastefulness again. So India had several inefficiency corridors that we had created. So we have to be careful on that. Come along here. Come. We have a place here. All right. Then we go further, you write the second point. You write, you can choose that. God bless you. You write, second point, very high inflation bird dropping means the bird feces, Vikas. All right. Then let's see this. And just in case you have one more confusion, that Sir said 8.4% of GDP as central government deficit and 4.2% of GDP as state government deficit. So with GDP, state government, don't forget, all states make the whole. So the total fiscal deficit of all state governments was 4.2%. So the total GDP should match the national GDP. All right, that is how we take these numbers. All right, then now, very high inflation in both urban and rural areas of India. Both urban and rural areas of India in 1989 and 1990. In 1989 and 1990, the consumer price index for industrial workers, in those days we used to have two consumer price index. The urban part was industrial workers and rural part was agricultural labor. All right, so we are talking on that. So consumer price index for industrial workers was above 10%, in both the years. So the accounting year is 89-90 and 90-91. All right, both the years. And consumer price index, CPI, you can write, consumer price index for agricultural labor was above 8% in both the years. Full stop. This increased cost of living, further discouraging demand, and making Indian commodities uncompetitive. Full stop. High inflation in India in these years was mainly due to mismanagement of food supply. In fact, a lot of inflation was food inflation in India. Mismanagement of food supply means you have food in your godown and you are not releasing it. and people are struggling to buy it from the market at a better price. In fact, I see something interesting even these days. You read newspaper articles where they say India has the lowest food reserves in the last 7 years, but then that lowest is still sufficiently high. Remember that. You know, the lowest food reserve in last 7 years is 49 million tons that we are sitting on. And the prescribed amount of food reserve that we should have on 1st October, that is before the harvesting of Kharif crop, is 30 million tons. So India still has 19 million tons of food more than what is prescribed for by the CACP, that how much India should keep. But then we keep saying that, oh, in the last 7 years it is the lowest. Well, it will be if I go up to 125 kg, then even if I become 95 kg, I can claim that, look, I am the least weight in the last 10 years, but I will still be fat. You know, you got to understand that. So saying that we have the lowest food reserves in the last 7 years, because we were having more than required food reserves in the last 7 years, leave alone that in the last 10, 12 years. We should not have had that. But again, for the purpose of pleasing people and buying and stocking and then wasting, we used to have all those food reserves. So always remember, the panic mode should be coming only when the real threat comes. If my government authority itself, the expert bodies, have suggested that 30 million tons of food grain is what you need to have on 1st October, because now the Kharif crop will be harvested and fresh crop will come in, then what do they say? I read an article actually in the Indian Express which was saying this. It said that even the Kharif crop is expected to grow by 7 million tons lesser this year, rice crop, paddy crop that is. But last year it was 130 million tons. So even if it grows by 7 million tons lesser, that will be 123 million tons. Now imagine if I assume, please understand my point here, if I assume that my wheat production is of the lower estimate, because the lowest estimate of wheat production is 92 million tons. And if I assume that my Kharif crop estimate, paddy, is also of the lowest estimate, around 123 million tons, we are still producing 215 million tons of food grains in a country where the demand has never gone above 130 million tons. So right now we should be bothered about what will we do with the rest 85 million tons. But we are bothered about banning exports. So we have to be careful that sometimes panic button is pressed by people who suggest that, oh, something wrong is going to happen, and then the government becomes conservative. You look at even now, the government is not letting food grains released to the market immediately, saying that no, we need to keep it for food security. Now we are putting money in Garib Kalyan. Think, you see, I'm relating it, you understand my point. So we are going down on the hunger index. And again the shouts will come that, oh, India has a hunger issue. I mean, our rank is 107 this year. You know, so they'll say that India has a hunger issue and we should solve that hunger issue. Now, I have two clarifications to make to you. One, hunger index does not signify hunger. It can look counterintuitive, but that is a fact. All right? Hunger index is about, child stunting and child wasting and child mortality. Now, and nutrition. Now remember, a child wasting and child stunting or child mortality can also happen if I don't give the child right vaccination. And that can also happen if I don't give the mother right nutrition. That can also happen if the mother is underage mother. So let's understand that it's not about hunger alone. You know, what we call it hunger index for the sake of the eyebrows it can raise and the attention it can get. It's like I change my name, I call myself Krantikari Jha. So then suddenly some people will think the fellow must be a revolutionary, you know. So that kind of a thing. So hunger index is that name. One clarification is that. But having given you that clarification, it doesn't mean that we don't have a food issue per se. We can have a food issue in India, especially nutrition issue in India. Anemic women or less iodine for the children. Nutrition issues are sure, I mean calcium deficiency, nutrition issues are surely there in India. Now if we debate that, the point should be that we should think about creating a system where rather than distributing only wheat and rice among people, we should be thinking about creating a system where we can have more nutrition for people and government can promote that. And when I'll teach you agriculture, I will bring it forth to you that how government can promote that. But government can promote that by shifting its policy stance from a wheat rice centered policy stance to something which can include pulses, and something which can include fruits and vegetables, and that can bring some difference to the system. But why does the government doesn't, or why is the government not releasing those food grains? Because imagine if government releases all the food grains to the market, even say 10 million tons, the price of food grains will come down. Then what is said? Who will lose? Yeah. But I thought farmers have already sold their crop. Because remember, the farmers sell their crop as it is harvested and sold in the market. सरकार के गोडाउन में क्रॉप कहाँ से आया? जो किसान ने बेचा है. तो अब क्रॉप किसके पास है? If the crop is in government godown, it is with the government, and the other part of the crop will be with those private traders who would have bought it from the farmers. Now if you release the food grain in the market more so, and the price comes down, the loss will not be for the farmer, the loss will be for the traders. And you don't want to hurt the traders, because many large traders are big contributors to the political party kitties. So you say, oh, it will harm the farmers, we won't release it. Now look at the dark humor in all this, that somebody says, sir, I am dying of hunger, please give me food. And we tell them, don't worry, we have 49 million tons for your food safety. You know, we are not releasing it. That's not a good space that we create. And don't forget, we had stacked up more in the past. So this whole thing is about mismanagement process, that we overbuy, then stock, and then not release it to the market. And then look for hoarders outside. The real hoarder is us as government. That we hoard maximum food. फिर हम ढूंढते हैं जमाखोर कौन है. जो जमाखोरी कर रहे हैं वो तो खुद ही नियम बना के कर रहे हैं. You know, so you have to understand here that government has to make its policies correct. In 80s also, late 80s, agricultural production in India was breaking all records. 1991 was the first year when we touched 150 million tons of food grain. And even yellow revolution was now getting established in India. And still food prices were rising almost at 12 to 13% per annum. So that was because government was buying food but not releasing on time. And that is why I tell you that whenever somebody raises the concern that food is in shortage in India, the larger part should be, okay, what is the recommended food stock for the government, and whether we are above or below that recommended food stock, and are we expected to go much below that food stock recommended, then of course food security can be an issue. But right now India's problem is surplus rather than shortage. Even in 1990 the problem was surplus rather than shortage. But the release was not done, and then inflation takes place. So that was more a supply shock or supply not happening on time rather than very high demand. It was not that food demand was very high, but food supply was not happening on time. Do I believe we are clear on this? In the same thing, you please continue. Food supply, increase in price of raw materials, increase in price of raw materials like minerals, metals, etc. Put a comma again. It was also due to inefficient industrial structure of India, which resulted in high cost of production, and therefore higher price in the market. And inflation picked up in 1990. inflation picked up in 1990 due to Gulf War. Due to Gulf War. Gulf War was the war between US-led forces of United Nations and Iraq, for occupation of Kuwait by Iraq. And that Gulf War meant that whole West Asia was now disturbed. And if West Asia is disturbed, that means oil price become higher. So that due to Gulf War, which resulted in very, very fast increase, in price of crude oil. Then you write the third point. You write very high current account deficit. Very high current account deficit. Now see, we take it down. You write, farmers in cobweb effect won't happen, Abdul, if you can inform them in advance. It's a bad prediction in today's India. Farmers are smarter today than what we count them as. All right, then you look at it here, and so you put it across. When we say very high current account deficit, this was due to 2-3 reasons. One was we had high inflation. Now if you have high inflation, what do you expect your exchange rate to do? Depreciate? Because my commodities will become costlier, people will buy less of it, and my exchange rate should depreciate. In those days, we used to follow fixed exchange rate system, and we did not let our currency devalue. We were following a fixed exchange rate system. We did not let our currency devalue. So what does that mean? We have inflation at home, and we are still not devaluing our currency, so my currency becomes overvalued. If the currency should have been, say, 30 rupees a dollar, and I'm keeping it at 12 rupees a dollar, I'm making my exports costlier and imports cheaper. So that was one problem that was happening. The second problem was, which we just discussed, the oil prices were rising, hurting our current account deficit. Another problem that was happening was that Indian products, as it is, were high cost products and poor on quality because of the industrial structure, so the demand for them will be very low in the global market. That was another factor that kept us with high current account deficit. And then Gulf War created one more problem for us. That was the remittances that used to come from the Gulf that we will get, they dried up, because there was a war. So now we had a situation in which current account deficit was above 4% of GDP. All right, now a decent current account deficit is not more than 2% of GDP. If it starts going above that, it's trouble that comes up. And we were having much higher. All right, so another factor was there that imports had picked up big time with the open general licensing, with liberalization of imports. So all that meant that people were importing a lot. But since our commodities were not competitive, exports had not happened as much. And that meant current account deficit was high enough. Do I believe we understand that? So you please take that down. You write, अविनाश हमारे पास यहाँ एक वो आ सकता है माउस. All right, let's see this. This is for some of your friends online. You bear with me. Please don't get worried. When I will give you questions, I will give you the model answers in the first 8-10 weeks. I just presumed, and wrongly so, I should not have presumed that you would have seen my YouTube discussions, on how we will conduct the course. So I'd already told you that first 8-10 weeks, when I give you the question, I just want you to think over those questions, and I will give you the answer to make sure how you write the answer. We can train you in that. And then after 10 weeks, when you have written 20-22 questions, then I will ask you to write answers. By then, I think you will be in a better zone. All right, so don't worry at all about how you will write the answers. There are 4 questions I saw online actually from 4 of you, but don't worry at all about that. Okay, let's see this. You write in that, current account deficit reached higher than 4% of GDP due to uncompetitive exports, comma, rise in imports after import liberalization of 1980s and due to high increase in price of crude oil. Full stop. It also increased because due to Gulf War, remittances from the Gulf had dried up completely, putting more pressure on current account. High CAD, current account deficit, high CAD implied that India needed higher inflow on capital account. I hope you can correlate that. If there is high deficit on current account, then you need higher inflow on capital account. What are the possibilities of inflow on capital account? Think. You can have inflow of FDI or inflow of FII or borrowings. These are the 3 major components of capital account, because foreign exchange reserves, of course, is accommodating transaction. So you can either have inflow of FDI, inflow of FII or borrowings. Now, we were not permitting FDI and FII. We were quite against that in 1990s. So the only thing 1980s and early 90s. So the only recourse we had was borrowing. And that's exactly what the world was not willing to give us anymore. That was the trouble part. Now, please understand one more thing. Then I'll make you write on this. Aap chronology samajhiye. What I need you to understand here is, understand how it all affects. So, government expenditure is high and at times wasteful. Since government expenditure is high and at times wasteful, it leads to high fiscal deficit. And that leads to, or that contributes quite a bit in high inflation. And high inflation contributes quite a bit in high current account deficit. Now, to manage the current account deficit, government will have to borrow, and that will mean interest obligations on government will increase, and that will, because private sector was not allowed to borrow in those days. There was no external commercial borrowings allowed. So government will have to borrow, and that will increase the interest burden on government. contributing further to current account deficit. That is why fiscal deficit and current account deficit, you call them a twin deficit problem. All right, fiscal deficit and current account deficit, you call them a twin deficit problem. That is why we say that there will be macroeconomic instability. If there is high fiscal deficit and high current account deficit, then that is twin deficit problem and macroeconomic instability. Correct? FDI and FII, you are absolutely right. Let's see. एक सेकंड बस मैं बताता हूँ एक बात, then तुम मुझसे पूछना. If you go back to basic macroeconomics, you will see that we think in terms of a circular flow notion that income should be equal to expenditure. Now think, in economics, when we use the word income, what do we do with it? What we do with it is, we do consumption, and we do saving, and we pay tax. That's what we do with it. On the other hand, expenditure is consumption and investment, and then government expenditure, and then net exports. That is all the expenditures in the economy. Consumption, expenditure by households, investment expenditure by households and firms, government expenditure by government, and net export is the expenditure by external sector on goods and services produced in my domestic territory. And all that we add to get the expenditure value. Now understand this further. That means this consumption can be cancelled both sides, and I can write this as savings. Now this savings is my private savings, that is saving done by private sector in my economy, and I can take tax minus government expenditure as government saving, right? That will be total savings in the economy, and this will be investment requirement of the economy. Like there are two facets to it. I'm showing you both, and please remain alive. All right, when I'm talking to you on that. कभी कभी मैं ये बातें करूँगा ना, आपको लगा अच्छा लग रहा है, दूर से आवाज़ आ रही है. So please remain careful on that. So saving, now there are two ways to express it. One way is I can write saving plus tax minus government expenditure, which I can mention as government saving, right? So private saving and government saving equal to investment plus net exports. Now this is what is called the saving investment gap of an economy. If my total savings are higher than my total investment, then I have a surplus which I can export to the world. If my total savings are higher than my total investment, then I have a surplus which I can export to the world. If my total savings, this is my total savings, saving by government, saving by private sector. If my total savings are higher than my total investment, private investment, this I is investment done by my private sector in my domestic territory. So if my total savings are higher than my total investment, then in that case I have a surplus. Suppose if these two add up to 50 and this is 47, then I can sell a +3 to the rest of the world. This net exports can represent a current account surplus. You understand that? But on the other hand, if my total savings become say lesser and my investment becomes more, then I will have to buy from the world. You understand that? If my total savings become lesser than my total investment, then I will have to buy from the world. Do I believe I reach you? I'm so sorry. Now that means, so this is current account deficit then. Now think, this is government saving or nothing but a negative of fiscal deficit. अब इसी इक्वेशन को मैं दूसरी तरह से लिख देता हूँ, आप समझ जाओगे मेरी बात. I can write this equation as, give me a minute. I can write this equation as saving is equal to this. Now I take the tax to this side. So investment plus government expenditure minus tax plus net exports. I can do that. आप अभी के लिए इस इक्वेशन को भूल जाओ, 1 वाले इक्वेशन को, आप इस 2 वाले इक्वेशन को देख लो. मैंने ये 2 कहाँ से क्रिएट किया? You forget this 1 for the time being. You see this 2. Saving is equal to investment plus government expenditure minus tax plus net exports. I can write it like that. You're okay on this? Now think what's happening. What's happening is, now if my, and this can represent my fiscal deficit. This can represent current account. This represents private investment, private savings. All right, I can write that. Now, what I'm trying to highlight to you is, if my private savings are not sufficient to meet my private investment and fiscal deficit requirement, then I will have a current account deficit. Suppose if my private savings are 25 units, my investment is 30 units, and my fiscal deficit is 3 units, that means my requirements are 33 units, but my saving is only 25 units. I will need 8 units more. Where do I get it from? Imports, isn't it? And these imports is what I will have to pay for. And I will pay for them for my capital account because I have a current account deficit here. You understand that? So if my total savings, and understand the point, if this fiscal deficit rises now, will the current account deficit rise or not? That is the twin deficit issue. Think if you take the same saving, same investment, and make this fiscal deficit 5, then your current account deficit will become minus 10. You understand that? So if your fiscal deficit rises, it will push up your current account deficit, or if your current account deficit rises, it will push up your fiscal deficit. That is the twin deficit issue that we have. That one deficit pushes the other one. For a given saving and investment. अगर आप अपने इकोनॉमी के सेविंग को और इन्वेस्टमेंट को कांस्टेंट मानते हो, then for a given saving and given investment, one deficit will push up the other deficit. So remember then, think, yes, I can get out of your way. So what I'm saying is, I just want you to understand this. What I'm saying is that if you begin with a circular flow idea, that income is equal to expenditure, if you begin, and those of you who have forgotten circular flow, forgotten GDP, GNP, saving, investment, it happens in life at times, go back home, open up macro NCRT, and read the chapter on national income. It's the first chapter. All right, so if you read the chapter on national income, you will start getting it back. So what I'm only saying is, there are 2 interpretations. One is total savings, private savings plus government savings. If they don't match the investment, if they're higher than investment, then I can sell more abroad. Net exports will rise. If my total savings are lesser than my total investment, then my net exports will fall. That part is okay. The second thing I am saying is, so net exports is nothing but current account. Now the second part I am saying is, I just rearranged the equation. And what I did was, I took, this was S, T, I, G and NX. I just took this T to the other side over here, and I wrote it as S is equal to I plus G minus T plus NX. I am only saying now that if the private saving is not high enough to meet these domestic requirements, then the only source by which I can get money or get commodity is from abroad. So my current account deficit will be higher. And if my current account deficit is more, that can be compensated only by capital account. Now on capital account, there are 3 ways. One, either the investors come into my country bringing FDI, or the investors bring into my country FII, or the investors bring into my country borrowings. In India, till 1990, we did not allow FDI and we did not allow FII. So the only thing that will come into my country will be borrowings, because that is the capital account inflow. And now the foreigners were not obliging us. And that became a crisis part. That where do you get the money from? You understand that? To pay back. अभी मैं आपको dual gap analysis नहीं पढ़ा रहा, but इसी equation में dual gap भी छिपा हुआ है. I'll tell you how. Your domestic savings, rupees, will be in rupee terms. They can meet your investment requirement and fiscal deficit requirement because they are in rupee terms. But now, if you by any reason, if you have an import requirement for anything, what do you have to pay? Rupee or dollar? And then your domestic savings can't compensate for that. So you got to earn your dollar. And that is the dual gap. One gap in terms of domestic currency, have enough savings to meet investment and fiscal deficit requirement, and have enough foreign exchange to meet the net exports, import requirements. But again, I will teach you dual gap separately in development economics, but I hope it is making a little more sense to you at the moment. That when you say dual gap analysis, एक आपके पास savings होनी चाहिए ताकि आप रुपए के terms में अपने खर्चे पूरे कर सको, investment and fiscal deficit. दूसरा आपके पास पैसे होने चाहिए foreign exchange ताकि आप foreign exchange का पैसा meet कर सको if you have a current account deficit. So dual gap is you should have resources in terms of rupee and you should have resources in terms of dollar to make sure that your external requirements and internal requirements both are fulfilled. Do I believe it makes sense to us? Yes, yes. High fiscal deficit means high demand by government and less supplying capacity by private sector. So that's a demand supply gap, pushes up inflation. Well, the immediate inflation will still happen to some extent because capital expenditures won't create output for you immediately. But it will give you some better results in a medium scale of time, no doubt about it. Interpretation of first equation is this, that suppose, if I can write it for you, saving plus government saving is equal to investment plus net exports. All right. So if your total savings in the economy are greater than investment, then you have something surplus left for exporting to the world. You understand that? If I have 100 rupees of savings and my investment need is 80 rupees, then 20 rupees is what I can give to the world. And if my total savings are lesser than investment, then that will mean my money from the world, I'll have to borrow from the world, take resources from the world to meet my expenditure. And that is why it is called saving investment gap, which will be filled through external sector. Yes. We'll give resources, we have more output produced. It's like you produce, think in terms of output, not money. So if I have produced 100 units and I need 80, now I have 20 units surplus, I'll give it to the world. You understand that? So that way is my savings higher than my investment plus investment per se. So this is my domestic resource higher than my domestic requirement. Now I have a surplus which I can release to the world. If my domestic resource is less than my domestic requirement, I have a deficit, can't release it to the world. I'd rather have to borrow from or bring things from the world. So just keep these two equations in mind, because these two equations tell us actually that how, now see what is this? This is nothing but the reverse of fiscal deficit, no? This T minus G, think, if this, I'm sure it's in front of you, if this T minus G rises, will this NX rise or not for a given S and I? So if government saves more, then current account surplus rises more. And if government saves less, that is if government's deficit rise, then current account surplus will also fall. So that is why, again I repeat, current account deficit and fiscal deficit, they become connected factors. We need to keep them like that in the mind. Do I believe these equations are understood then? All right. And in case you don't know why I wrote C plus I plus G plus NX or why I wrote C plus S plus T, let me know as soon as possible. All right? फिर मैं तुम्हें ले जाके मेरा एक रूम है ऊपर, वहाँ ले जाऊंगा, एनसीईआरटी देके उस रूम में बंद कर दूंगा और तभी खोलूंगा जब तुम वो पढ़ के निकलोगे. All right? So in case you didn't get all that, please read NCERT macro. It's important. All right, let's see this then. Current account deficit. And that is macroeconomic instability. That we had complete macroeconomic instability, high inflation, high fiscal deficit, high current account deficit. When you are macroeconomically unstable, you are macroeconomically vulnerable. All right? Okay, you take this up, then in the same thing you write high current account deficit. In the same point, high current account deficit combined with high current account deficit combined with high fiscal deficit was further resulting in reducing lenders' confidence. Further resulting in reducing lenders' confidence. Put a fourth point. The lender's confidence was reduced further by one more factor. So you write that as the fourth point. Lender's confidence was reduced by one more factor. You write very high short-term loans. Very high short-term loans of the economy. You write the short-term loans, and remember short-term loans are loans which have to be paid back within 1 year. Alright, loans which have to be paid back within 1 year. So you write short-term loans taken by government, short-term loans taken by government from abroad was $1.45 billion $1.45 billion while total foreign exchange reserves was only $1 billion. Total foreign exchange reserves was only $1 billion. Therefore, lenders panicked, and it resulted in foreign exchange crisis. It resulted in foreign exchange crisis. Now, on a cleaner slate, try understanding things once more with the equation. All right, try understanding it. It happens like this. If you have savings is equal to investment plus fiscal deficit plus a current account. All right? This saving is private saving. This investment is private investment, not government. Private investment. This is government's fiscal deficit, and this is current account of the economy. Now, if I am saving, say for a second now, if I am saving 100 rupees, or say 100 units, just to keep it cleaner, 100 units, if my investment requirements are, say, 105 units, and my fiscal deficit is 5 units. Now that means that I have 110 units requirement for my meeting my domestic expenditure, and my resources are only 100 units. And that will mean, to balance that, I will need 10 units of imports, and that creates a current account deficit of 10 units. And that means I need a capital account surplus, and capital account surplus can come, and in those days could have come, only by borrowings. This one part is clear? Now, I repeat again, I will teach you dual gap analysis again, but just to tell you what I mean, even if you have a high domestic savings, say 100 units, but for some reasons if you need to import, you cannot pay for your imports in your domestic currency. If you cannot pay for your imports in domestic currency, you need foreign currency. Now your foreign currency can come in if you export more. Your foreign currency can come in if remittances flow into your country. Your foreign currency can come in if factor income from abroad comes in. Your foreign currency can come in through investments, and it can come in through borrowings. You understand that? So if a country has to import, why is dual gap analysis relevant? Why am I discussing it here? Why did I give it to you in the notes? What did we plan? Before 1991, we had a heavy plan about import substituting industrialization. Now, that's cool. And we were export pessimists. We believed that we will not be exporting a lot. And even if we believed we will export, but we didn't have the capability because we were import substituting, so obviously efficiency levels were low. Now, but that doesn't mean you will import nothing. Even if you are an economy which is planning import substitution, you will still be importing raw materials like crude oil, metals, minerals, because you can't do without them. If you are a developing country, you will need to import technology. So all that will mean that you need foreign exchange reserves for those imports. Now again I repeat, either your exports should be good enough that you have enough foreign exchange reserves to pay for your raw materials, to pay for technology, and so on. If you don't have strong exports, then either then you should have such high remittances that you can pay for them. If you even don't have that, then the foreign investment flow should be such that you can pay for them. And if you even don't have that, then you will have to depend on borrowings or aid. Do I believe I reach you on that? So that was the basic idea of dual gap. That even if you are a high saving country, your domestic savings won't help you beyond a point, because you will need to import things, and those importables have to be paid by in foreign exchange terms. You understand this? So that was the basic dual gap idea, reflected by this equation also, that A, you have a gap in domestic economy, due to which you have import needs. Now to fulfill these import needs, you need a foreign inflow, because this is the second gap that is being created. One gap was your domestic investment, domestic deficit higher than your savings. But that results in a second gap, that now you have a current account deficit, and you got to pay to the foreigners also in foreign exchange terms. So now you have two gaps, domestic and foreign. But domestic gap will mean, okay, pay rupees and get away with it. In the worst case, what can you do as a government? If you have high domestic borrowings, you can at least print money and pay it back. Of course, it will create inflation and instability, but you can print money and pay it back. But if it is a foreign money, you can't even print it and pay it back. So the whole idea of dual gap was that if countries want to actually become self-sufficient, then they will have to work on their efficiency, export probabilities, investment capacities, so that they can make sure that they have enough foreign exchange reserves to pay for their foreign exchange requirements. Do I believe this makes a little more sense to you? All right, and it will make more sense to you when I will teach you dual gap analysis in detail. But for the time being, you just keep it like that. That is why we are studying it here. हमने प्लान कर लिया बड़े आराम से कि हम इंपोर्ट सब्स्टिट्यूशन करेंगे. हमने रियलाइज नहीं किया कि बहुत सारी चीज़ें इंपोर्ट फिर भी करनी पड़ेंगी और उसके पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे. You know that where will we pay the money for the other things we will need to import. So export promotion is what people said that ideally what we should have thought of, because certain imports for India were inevitable. They had to be done. See, how do you convert rupee in dollar? You need somebody to trade and allow you to give rupee in dollar. What trouble it creates further? You convert your rupee into dollar by selling rupee, buying dollar, further depreciates your money. And that will mean you need more rupee to buy future dollars, further depreciates your money. It's a never-ending saga then. You see that? All right. Now what you do, you write below that foreign exchange reserves in India, a foreign exchange crisis in India, foreign exchange crisis in India was a reflection of foreign exchange crisis in India was a reflection of poor economic structure, mainly represented by industrial backwardness. Industrial backwardness combined with a market system which had high cost of production and relatively lesser efficiency of output. In March 1991, India reached a situation where it did not have sufficient foreign exchange reserves to pay for even 4 weeks of import or to pay its short-term debt, DEBT of course, to pay its short-term debt to foreigners. The world was going to declare India, after a full stop, the world was going to declare India a bankrupt nation And if they declared us bankrupt, that would have meant throwing us back by 10, 15 years. All our decision-making capacity would have been compromised. All right, so a bankrupt nation, and India had to pledge PLEDGE, pledge RBI's gold to Bank of England, and Bank of Switzerland to get enough reserves to pay back the immediate creditors. This was the crisis of 1991. We will keep the story till there. The further thing that evolved was we had to negotiate a loan with IMF, and IMF gave us a loan of around $3 billion, with which we started restructuring and then revived the economy with economic reforms. All right, so that was in 1991 was the last time that India took a loan from IMF. After that, we have not yet taken a loan from IMF. Today, we are the 8th largest contributor to IMF. Also remember, I saw it on the group that you were discussing, that 1957 to 1991, 14 times we went to IMF, and 1991 included in it. 1991 was not the 15th time. 1991 was the 14th time that we went to IMF. You don't need to remember all the years that we went to them. All right, you just have to remember that 14 times India had to take IMF's help for bailing itself out. Now, I will first cover with you the idea on saving investment, and then we go into the occupational structure after that. So you please take out your loans, your your notes, and we take it up. Yes, you are audible. That is the problem part here. That is a question one of your friends asked me online also. I thought I'll answer personally only, but maybe it can be a question in many of yours mind. That okay, why think about borrowing? Why think about a current account deficit? Let's go and increase savings. But let's not forget we were India. We are still. Now that means the saving capacity will be very low. I'll teach you saving and investment just now. So we were already saving beyond the capacity. A poor country cannot save beyond a limit. Like that is what one person suggested, that why couldn't RBI generate savings? Nobody can generate savings beyond a point. Already don't forget, I repeat, we are saving beyond the limit. Also remember, since I have not told you the whole story, gradually as all the jigsaw of the puzzle gets fixed, you will understand. But also remember, there are more troubles in it. Government was taking away a lot of deposits. So where was the business for banks? Savings is done by banks, financial institutions, but it was all captivated by government. Now imagine we have statutory liquidity ratio at 38.5% and cash reserve ratio at 15% in 1989, which means if a bank is getting 100 rupees, 53.5 rupees is going to the government itself. So saving capacity is also a question mark. For developing economies, always saving capacity will be lesser and investment needs will be higher. All right, and that's what creates the problem point, that you have a gap in your or a mismatch in things. All right, now I hope you have taken out your notes on saving and investment. Bank of England and Sri Lanka and Switzerland have generally tend to have surpluses. That's why the two banks were chosen. All right. Now, first of all, in your notes, if you will see, and since I've given it to you, I'm not making you write anything. You just stick to your notes and remain deep inside it. So, when you see this, when we say savings, it means that when your earnings are more than expenditure for households, firms, government, and other final consumers. All right, for anyone, if savings is more than investment. In your notes, it will be on page 12. No, something else, 13. So my notes are different from yours. That's bad. All right. So, okay. So savings will be that whenever you talk about savings, that savings will mean that whatever surplus of your income is there beyond your expenditures. And whenever we use the word savings in economics, understand that the major part of savings is the financial investments that the households do. All right, major part of savings. Look at how an economy can save. I'm assuming that all of you know that every economy has 4 sectors: household, government, firms, and external. Now think, households can save by their income above their expenditure, which they put into shares, which they put into bonds, which they put into fixed deposit, which they put into banks. So any financial asset purchased by household is considered as savings. Again, if you see in your notes, I've given you that point already, that savings is divided into 3 broad institutional sectors for savings: households, private, corporate, and public. All right, these are the 3 sectors that can save: households, private, corporate, and public. Now, household savings are financial savings, or household savings can be physical assets like, say, a house, or household saving can be a physical asset like gold. But that gold in bullion terms, bars. If the household is keeping jewelry, that's not taken as saving, that is taken as consumption. I'm teaching you how it is measured, nothing else. All right. So bullions with household savings, houses with household savings, and similarly the financial assets of households savings. Do I believe we are clear on that? Firm's savings is nothing but the undistributed profit. Savings by firm will be undistributed profit. All right. If the firms are having undistributed profit, or firms are having retained earnings, then that is called firm's savings. All right. So household savings will be all financial assets and the physical assets that they can have. Firm's savings is the undistributed profit. And if government runs a budget surplus, then that is what we call a government saving. That if government has a fiscal surplus, sorry, if the inflows are more than the outflows, then we say that is called a government saving. So 3 ways to save in any economy. Households can save in financial assets and physical assets. Firms can save as the profit that they did not distribute. See, what are the 3 ways in which you look at profit? A profit, you first have to pay a corporate tax out of it, and then you will pay dividend out of it to your shareholders. After paying the corporate tax and the dividend, for those of you who may be uninitiated, is the money received by shareholders from profit of the firm. So after paying for corporate tax and dividend, whatever is left with the firm is what we call their retained earning, or we call their undistributed profit. All right, or we call their corporate saving. So it all means the same. So profit will have these 3 parts: dividend, undistributed profit, and corporate savings. All right. So dividend, corporate tax, and corporate savings. So corporate saving again contributes to total savings. And then fiscal deficit, of course, a fiscal surplus of the government. Please understand, in any economy, what will be the requirement for these savings? The savings will be used for investment, and if the government has a deficit, it has to be met there. Normally in every economy, there are corporate savings and there are private household savings. Normally, government doesn't save or is unable to save because of the high developmental expenditure, low tax base that we see in a developing economy. So if you look at even India, most of the years in India, barring 4 or 5 years in the entire 75 years of India's economic history, of independent India's economic history, uh, apart from 4 or 5 years, government never had a fiscal surplus. We always ended up having a fiscal deficit. So the major sources for saving in India have been households and firms. Even within the two, households are the larger source of saving. All right, even within these two, households are the larger source of savings. Do I believe we are okay till this? Now, when we look at trends of saving, we begin with the first trend, 1950 to 1967. This was low savings phase. All right, this was low savings phase. Low saving as in, I have not mentioned it there. If you could just write it on the side somewhere or in your copy, that's your choice. But somewhere on it, you write, I'm giving you the savings percentage there. You write, India's savings rate in 1951 was 4% of GDP, and increased to 14% of GDP by 1967. But remember, even if it increased to 14% of GDP, it was still lesser than what was ideally needed. The idea was, unless you don't have a savings rate around 20%, you can't have, you recall capital output ratio? Think like this. If you are planning a 5% GDP growth, and you know that your incremental capital output ratio, that is extra capital needed to produce extra output, your incremental capital output ratio is this. How many extra units of capital you need to produce extra units of output? Suppose this is 4. It was 4 in case of India. So that means that you need 4 units addition to capital. This K is for capital in economics. Whenever we will use K, it will mean capital. Whenever we use Y, it will mean output or income. All right, so whenever we use K, it means capital. Whenever we use Y, it means output or income. So now, for every 1 unit of output that you need 4 extra units of capital. That is the incremental capital output ratio, ICOR as we call it. Now that means that if your GDP growth is 5%, think you will need your investment to be at 20%. ये कैपिटल आपका 20, अगर ये 4 है और आप चाहते हो कि ये जो है ये 5% के रेट पे बढ़े, तो इसे कितने पे बढ़ना पड़ेगा, यही बता रहा हूं. All right, if your GDP growth, if your incremental capital output ratio is 4 and your GDP growth you need is 5%, then that will mean your capital should increase at the rate of 20%, and increase in the rate of capital is investment, the capital formation part. So you need investment to be 20%. I repeat again, if your capital output ratio is 4 and you need your GDP to grow at 5%, then that will mean your investment should rise at 20%, the change in capital stock. What I'm trying to teach you is, now, how will your investment grow at 20% when your savings are matching it? So unless your savings are at least not 17, 18, 19%, and then you get some foreign aid, foreign loans worth 2-3%, you cannot reach an investment rate of 20%. So even if India's, and now go back to what I have already taught you, in the third 5-year plan, what was the targeted growth of India? 5%, isn't it? We actually achieved much lesser, but the targeted growth was 5%. But to reach that targeted growth of 5%, we needed a savings of 18 to 20%. But we were saving hardly 14-15%. And that is why the actual growth became 3.5-3.6%. You understand that? So the incremental capital output ratio was giving us an idea that, look, capital efficiency in India is 4. That is, if you use 4 units of capital, then you will produce 1 unit of output. Now that means if you want your output to grow at 5%, you will have to let your capital grow at 20%. But then that will mean your savings should also rise at that rate. Then only your investments can be matched up. But savings were rising at a much lesser rate. And that is why overall growth remained low. Do I believe you understand that? And then you know what it creates? The vicious cycle of poverty. You are unable to save as much. So that means you are unable to invest as much. And that means you are unable to have enough capital stock. And that means you are unable to have enough income. It kind of becomes a circle then. You know, so India was trapped. And then add to that, okay, let me take you further, then I'll add to that. So, yes, incremental is the marginal term. Capital output ratio is K by Y. Incremental, yes, incremental capital output ratio is change in K due to change in Y. Since we are assuming it to be a constant, it will mean that this will also match the capital output ratio. If you assume the incremental capital output ratio to be a constant, then it surely matches the capital output ratio also. All right. Do I believe all of us are clear on this? So ideally you would assume all savings are translating into investment. All right. Along with that, some loans from abroad or some surplus coming in as aid from abroad, and that should be your total investment. So that is why you will always see that investment percentage will be a couple of percent higher than savings percentage. Even today you will see that, because foreign savings will complement it. Now those foreign savings can come in as FDI, FII, or those foreign savings can come in as foreign borrowings, or simply foreign aid given by the governments. All right, any of those ways. Yes, so if we want to grow 20% investment, then ideally the savings should not be less than 18-19%, because anything less than that, you will not be able to manage your investment at that level. So if you want your investment to be 20%, then savings should be very close to that, 18-19%. Then 1%, 2% you can borrow from abroad, or you can have an aid, and then that matches up to your investment need. All right. There is one correction. One of you are saying online that undistributed profits are pension. They are not pension. Please don't keep yourself in any such world. Undistributed profits are not pension. All right. Don't go in that direction. It will be trouble. Undistributed profits are undistributed profits. That profit which is kept by the corporate sector, not distributed to anybody else. And again I repeat, they are not pensions. All right. Workers जो save करते हैं, ये सब लोग clear रखना. Workers जो save करते हैं वो अलग बात है, और firm जो save करते हैं वो अलग बात है. जो वर्कर की प्रोविडेंट फंड कंट्रीब्यूशन है, उसे फर्म अपने प्रॉफिट में काउंट नहीं कर पाएंगे. इट्स नॉट दैट इफ वर्कर्स आर कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू देयर प्रोविडेंट फंड एंड टुमारो द फर्म सेज ओके दिस इज माय प्रॉफिट, लेट मी डू समथिंग अबाउट इट. आई नो इन इंडिया सर्टेन एंटरप्रेन्योर्स हैव दोस टेंडेंसीज, बट दैट्स नॉट लीगल, so that's not allowed. So remember, that's not nothing to do with pensions at all. Okay, now see, why were the savings low? One was we were an agricultural economy. And since we were an agricultural economy, the propensity to save was low. Income is less. If income is less, then to meet all your basic needs, your expenditure will be gone. So propensity to consume remains high. You understand that? And propensity to save remains low. That is the first point I have given you. I'm sure you can see that propensity to save in agriculture was much lesser. So remember, the normal reason is the agricultural share of GDP was high, population in agriculture was high, but let us not forget that they were not earning very high. So in that case, the propensity to save will be lesser. Another reason is when you are a rural economy, I can believe you are all listening to me, everybody alive? Perfect. When you are a rural economy, in that case, the propensity to save is also low because financial saving tools are very less. You understand that the tools of financial savings, they are less. You don't have banks and you don't have insurance companies and you don't have mutual funds and you don't suddenly go that, okay, I save this and tomorrow, what is their saving? Their savings will be in terms of land. Like say for example, I have a surplus today and I'm in a rural economy. I'll go buy land. I will go buy cattle. You understand that? So that is the rural saving system. So financial saving or physical saving in machinery, etc., was not observed. So that was one reason why Indian savings rate remained low. All right. Even though government was creating certain institutions, but they had not penetrated enough. Like LIC had just initiated in '56, or post office banks had been created, or SBI had been created. But then there was not sufficient presence of banking, insurance, and so on, so that people could mobilize their savings. So most of the rural savings would go in which direction? They would go in land purchase or they would go in cattle purchase, and in economics we take that all as consumption rather than savings. All right. Then the second reason I have given you is that government could also not save much because there will be huge requirements to fill the gap of quick industrialization. Government needed to invest more, government needed to make infrastructure. So whatever government was getting was lesser than what was needed to meet the requirements of the economy. You understand that? So agricultural sector was able to save less and government was able to save less. I want you to write a third point in it. You please add that. Just a third point to it. Corporate savings were low. Corporate savings were low due to low financial infrastructure. Corporate savings were low due to low financial infrastructure. When I use the term financial infrastructure, I mean the number of banks, the number of insurance companies, network agencies. All right, that is the idea. So due to low financial infrastructure, to mobilize those savings, all right. So this was the other reason why savings tended to be low in this time period. Yes. Why will we? See, land is not a capital good because land is not a good actually. You see that? Land is land. Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship. So land will be land. It can't be a good. And similarly, cattle are commodities. You purchase something. But they're not goods. Don't forget the basics there. Isn't it? We're talking capital goods. And they are living beings. Alright, so there again, consumption becomes a part here. Alright, yes. Gold jewelry, any jewelry for that matter, is taken as an ornament. Ornaments are not for investment. Imagine losing money on making charges. Then where are you investing? No, I'll tell you what. I've been trying to convince my wife also about it. She's also not convinced. So, but I'll tell you what. Investments mean that you should ideally make money on it by keeping it at any particular place and so on. So gold is either intermediate good if it is used for jewelry making, but if it is a gold jewelry already, then you are buying it. You may have a capital gain on it because of its price rising, but imagine the levels that will happen. So if you are paying, say, something like 400 rupees for 10 gram on making charge, 400 rupees per gram on making charge, and then you buy a gold of 30,000 rupees, then effectively you are buying it for 34,000 rupees. Now if the gold price rises by 12% or 11%, then you start breaking even. And then when gold price rises by 20%, then you have a gain of 10%. Now investors don't do that. Investors believe that something should give me money from the scratch. Now imagine a gold bar. The gold bar will have a making charge something like 10 rupees per gram, 20 rupees per gram. So it's hardly 100 rupees, 200 rupees over the 10 gram, which means you're hardly losing any money on a 30,000 rupees gold because you're getting it for 30,200 rupees. Now any increase gives you money. You understand that? So gold bars are taken as investment and savings by households, of course. And gold jewelry is taken as consumption because they don't add value as much. Plus, gold jewelry is used as an ornamentation. You use it, wearing it, going to the places, parties, etc. So there is a wear and tear impact. You understand that? So all that is the reason why in economics we consider that any expensive good, like even if you buy a very expensive television set or a very expensive car, then it's possible its value you may or say even a painting, but they're not taken as savings in that sense. Like some financial planners have started projecting that you buy paintings which are high value and they are savings, but actually in economics we don't still count them as savings. Everything is consumption in all those. Yeah, but you don't lose money because you have not paid any making charge on it. Like the value doesn't get lost out. I'll tell you, I'm sorry I'm interfering, but understand like this. Let's be very clear about the definitions. So when you say investment means addition to the stock of capital goods. You understand that? So anything that doesn't add to the stock of capital goods cannot be investment. That is why I was just answering a question that land cannot be investment. Yeah. But that mortgage you can keep for cattle also. In fact, in rural India, we had instances in 1960s and 50s, especially when people would simply mortgage some particular asset of their house and then take money on that. But we can't define all of that as savings in economics. Savings need to be technically defined. So that technical definition doesn't include this factor. All right. I can take it one by one. Yes, yes. नहीं, एक्चुअली पता है क्या हो रहा था, जब तुम अपने इनिशियल स्टेजेस ऑफ प्रोडक्शन में होते हो तो तुम्हारा कैपिटल आउटपुट रेशियो रादर लो रहता है बिकॉज ऑफ डिमिनिशिंग मार्जिनल प्रोडक्टिविटी. इट्स ओनली व्हेन यू स्टार्ट यूजिंग मोर कैपिटल दैट द कैपिटल आउटपुट रेशियो विल राइज. ऑलराइट, बिकॉज जस्ट टू रिकॉल फॉर यू, ये प्रोडक्शन फंक्शन होता है ना हमारा, तो जैसे तुम आगे जाते जाओगे आपके कैपिटल की एफिशिएंसी कम होती जाएगी. ऑलराइट, दैट इज द फैक्टर. Yes, yes. सेविंग्स होनी चाहिए 18-19%. ठीक है, उस वक्त की बात कर रहे हो. ठीक है, फिजिकल असेट्स अपने आप में इन्वेस्टमेंट बनते हैं. अगर मैंने गवर्नमेंट की, मैं तो बिल्कुल नहीं कह रहा हूँ यहाँ गवर्नमेंट का कोई भी काम है, मैं बिल्कुल ही नहीं कह रहा हूँ यहाँ गवर्नमेंट का कोई काम ही नहीं है. मैं तो कह रहा हूँ इकोनॉमी ऐसे चलती है. ठीक है, कोई भी इकोनॉमी है, वो सेविंग गवर्नमेंट कर ले या कोई और कर ले. ठीक है, तो इसमें सरकार का कोई लेना देना नहीं है. मैं कह रहा हूँ अगर तुम 5% ग्रो करना चाहते हो और तुम्हारा ICOR 4 है, तो तुम्हें मिनिमम 20% का इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए, और अगर मिनिमम 20% का इन्वेस्टमेंट चाहिए तो 18-19% की सेविंग्स चाहिए। ठीक है, ये बात कर रहे हैं। यस यस, because corporate, where will the corporate save? The corporate will save if you give them possibility of buying others shares, buying others bonds, buying some insurance. You understand that? That is corporate savings. All these things are financial infrastructure, which was a missing link in India. All right, understand? Yes yes. Yes, no, actually jewelry, understand it like this. Virat Kohli buys a t-shirt. Virat Kohli is Virat Kohli. He auctions the t-shirts, gets 10 times more money for it. Will the t-shirt be a saving? You understand that? Savings imply that you are using either, understand the definition. Please understand that. अपने common sense को break लगा दो सब लोग, ठीक है? मैं सीरियसली बोल रहा हूँ, कॉमन सेंस को ब्रेक लगा दो। कुछ चीजें टेक्निकली डिफाइंड हैं, आप उन्हें नहीं बदल सकते। आपके अंदर का की इच्छा चाहे जो हो रही हो, बट फ्यू थिंग्स आर टेक्निकली डिफाइंड, वी कांट चेंज देम। सो अंडरस्टैंड दैट द टेक्निकल डेफिनेशन इज दैट व्हेन यू से सेविंग्स, इट हैज टू बी समथिंग which creates a financial asset or belongs to that, or something which creates equipment or commodities in hand which can be used for manufacturing, or it can be something which is with the government as a surplus from its budget, or the corporate's undistributed profit. Anything else apart from that we don't count as savings. मैंने क्यों विराट कोहली का example दिया? Gold, jewelry is not bought because you plan to sell it one day to create a factory or create a production unit. It is bought to wear. You understand that? अब ये तो हमारे देश में प्रचलित प्रथा है कि नहीं, इससे तुम्हें प्रोटेक्शन भी रहेगा फ्यूचर में, उससे अच्छा तो गोल्ड बॉन्ड खरीद के दे दो। बट गोल्ड बॉन्ड पहन के नहीं घूम सकते। ये समझना जरूरी है आपका ये बात, that is the whole connect between the two that you need to understand. So once you understand that connect, you will be able to appreciate that when we talk savings, we are actually talking about resources taken out of current income and not used for expenditure. But when you are using gold jewelries, you are actually spending money. हाउसिंग इसीलिए इन्वेस्टमेंट भी है और सेविंग भी है। हाउसिंग इज द ओनली लॉन्ग टर्म असेट ऑफ हाउस होल्ड्स विच इज टेकन एज इन्वेस्टमेंट, और चूंकि वो हाउस होल्ड का इन्वेस्टमेंट है और सर्कुलर फ्लो में सेविंग और इन्वेस्टमेंट सेम होते हैं, तो उसे सेविंग भी माना जाता है। समझ रहे हो मेरी बात? इसलिए नहीं कि उसमें कैपिटल गेन्स आएगा, इसलिए क्योंकि वो ऑलरेडी एक इन्वेस्टमेंट है। लैंड इज लैंड एंड लैंड इज टेकन एज अ सेविंग इफ यू आर गोइंग टू यूज इट फॉर एग्रीकल्चरल पर्पसेस, because that will help you produce more in future. All right, and there is one question that one of your friend asks, that I hope about gold all of you are clear. Again remember, undistributed profit in PSUs is firm saving. Public sector undertaking are firms, not government. Everybody should be very clear about it. Public sector undertakings will be firms, not government. All right. And tell me this, a low capital output ratio then is efficient capital or inefficient capital? Efficient capital. I need lesser incremental capital to produce output. Does everybody understand land is not investment? Land is not an addition to capital good. Please understand that. अब इसीलिए मैं बार बार कहता हूँ NCERT पढ़ो, और जो लोग ग्रेजुएट भी हो गए हो या पोस्ट ग्रेजुएट हो गए हो लेकिन एनसीईआरटी भूल गए हो, वो भी पढ़ो, क्योंकि डिग्री थोड़ी पढ़ाई होती है, पढ़ाई तो नॉलेज होती है। तो भूल गए हो तो पढ़ लो दोबारा, उसमें क्लियर कट लिखा हुआ है दैट इन्वेस्टमेंट इज एडिशन टू स्टॉक ऑफ कैपिटल गुड्स। नाउ लैंड इज नॉट अ गुड, सो लैंड कैन नॉट बी इन्वेस्टमेंट। यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट? Don't think that everything that gives you a capital gain has to be investment. You understand that? Everything that gives you a capital gain is not investment. Investment is addition to capital goods, and capital goods are all those goods which are used for further production of goods and services. All right, so again I repeat, unless you don't remain technically clear on these things, you will be creating some errors like this. Again, rent of a house is not investment, rent of a house is rent. ये सब बातें जब तुम मुझे पूछते हो ना तो बताते हो कि तुमने एनसीईआरटी नहीं पढ़ी है अभी तक. We use, see, again remember another thing. Americans have a very high MPC, rather they have a very low MPS because. All right. Again, remember, when you say gold can be pleaded against loans, I mean, one of you also said it, one of you said saying it online. Many things can be pledged against loan. You go to rural areas, people pledge their children for loan. आप समझिए मेरी बात को. लोग अपने बच्चों को खड़ा कर देते हैं, कहते हैं भाई ये तुम्हारे घर काम करेगा. इसका मतलब ये थोड़ी है कि वो बच्चा कोलैटरल बन गया. यू नो, अंडरस्टैंड दैट द टेक्निक. मैं आप बार बार क्यों इंसिस्टेंट हूं कि तुम ये टेक्निकलिटी सीखो, क्योंकि एक तो आलस मत करो एनसीईआरटी पढ़ने में, दूसरा ये सब्जेक्ट एक टेक्निकल सब्जेक्ट है. तो जब तक तुम इसकी टेक्निक्स नहीं सीखोगे, unless you don't know the basic techniques of it, how will you apply yourself? Everywhere common sense doesn't work. Understand that. You know, तुम्हें common sensically कुछ बातें लग सकती हैं, पर वो रूल नहीं है. That is what I'm trying to train you right now. And those rules have to be understood so that your common sense works correctly. It's like saying chess खेल रहे हो और तुम बोलो मेरा जो knight है वो 2.5 टर्न्स ही क्यों चलेगा, मैं सीधा चलाऊंगा उसको. ये समझना जरूरी है हमें. यू नो कि मुझे तो लगता है ये सीधा भी चलना चाहिए. तो कुछ चीजें रूल्स हैं, उन रूल्स को तुम वायलेट, अभी मैक्रो पढ़ोगे तब तो और मेरे ऊपर फेंकने लगोगे कुछ चीजें फिर. बिकॉज मैक्रो इकोनॉमिक थ्योरी इज बेस्ड इंटायरली ऑन assumptions. You know, in that case, whichever model was set up, the model had its own assumptions, and you worked with those assumptions. That is why neoclassicals were saying something very opposite to what the new Keynesians were saying, or what the monetarists were saying. So you got to live with the model. So I repeat again, gold is not investment, jewelry is not investment, investment word. Gold in bar terms is taken as savings because people can use it for future value creation. Financial asset is used as saving, people use it for future value creation. Agricultural land in agricultural sector is taken as saving, people use it for future value creation. Alright, but land otherwise is not capital good because it is not a good. Goods are commodities, वस्तु को कहते हैं, और land जमीन को कहते हैं. आप economics में land किसे बोलते हो? What is land in economics? All natural resources. So land will mean even mountains, and land will mean even rivers, and land will mean even minerals. So nobody can get up tomorrow and say no minerals, I mean rivers can't be land, you guys are mad. You understand that? So we got to be careful that how is the theory defining things. Unless you are not careful on that, you will make elementary mistakes. And that is what I'm trying to save you from. That don't make elementary mistakes by not knowing the theory. You have to know the theory to be able to implement it in practice. Yes, yes. Yes, but households supply machinery equipments when they run household enterprises. There are small cottage industries running, which are not always qualifiable as firms. So while counting, we count them as households, but they are actually running cottage industries. Households can need equipment if they are doing agriculture. You understand that? So for all purposes, equipments are needed. Houses. Housing is taken as an investment because housing is something that serves you for a very long period of time and will be able to create value for you through rental income or by saving your rental income expenditure. Alright, so, and again remember, ये भी नहीं है कि ये rules मैं कह रहा हूँ या ये rule NCERT कह रही है. These are all rules universally established as system of national income accounting. So SNA is a United Nations body created in 1953, meets every 10-12 years and decides the rule on national income accounting. So what will be saving, what will be investment, what will be consumption, what will be financial savings and all. SNA defines all that. And those definitions are what work in our system. All right, so please go on like that. I'm taking you further. If you look at phase one, one thing I give you a conclusion was, is that it did not focus on financial sector. The basic focus was on capital formation sector, capital goods sector by government. Also remember, please keep connecting it to the growth process in this time period, where initial growth was high, but gradually the growth started petering out because savings did not increase as much as what was needed. All right. The whole picture you will get as you see investment also. Then in the time period 1969 to 1975-76, this is where savings started increasing at a comparatively faster rate. So from 14% savings in 1967, we reached 19% savings by 1975. Now look at the situation. This was a period when growth rate was not high, but savings were still becoming high. There were reasons for it, and I've given you few. I'll make you write one more. One was farm income was rising because green revolution was not now spreading. So with rise in farm income, the disposable income was rising, and high disposable income can lead to higher savings rate also. Basic consumption needs were now being met, so savings rate was also rising. All right. The second reason I've given you is that there was increase in household income as more government employment, more amount of government expenditure increase on infrastructure development and all. This was happening. So multiplier effect was creating household income increase. So with rise in household income, because of high government expenditure, see, high government expenditure means what? Government is buying from the market. So when government is buying from the market, it means somebody is getting that money. And that was increasing household income, and that was leading to high savings ratio again. Then the other thing I've given you was better utilization of savings after nationalization of commercial banks. So 1969, the banks were nationalized, and very fast rural branch expansion happened. And with very fast expansion of rural branches, urban branches, branches in the underdeveloped regions of the country, that meant a lot of small savings could be mobilized here. All right, a lot of small savings could be mobilized here. So with branch mobilization, a lot of small savings could be mobilized here. Do I believe these three things make sense to you? Add a fourth to it. Another point. Government had established India's only mutual fund, UTI. Government had established India's only mutual fund, UTI. So remember, a mutual fund does what? It tells people you give me money, then people give it money, that is savings, and then it uses that money to invest it in various places and give people the money back, and the return back. That is a mutual fund. So India's first mutual fund was UTI. It was established with the UTI Act 1964, and UTI started mobilizing savings good after especially 3-4 years of existence, because it got its economies of scale by then. You know, the agents were recruited and more people were informed about it. The returns were now being given. So more people were buying these UTI units from the market. And a fifth point you write in that, there was faster increase in insurance growth, faster increase in insurance growth due to more insurance companies set up by government. More insurance companies set up by government. You know, GIC was another one that was being established, Oriental Insurance. So there were various insurance companies we were setting now. So car insurance, health insurance. Now the general insurance was not very, very popular, but life insurance was now becoming popular as a saving tool. You know, people were now being convinced after 15 years of hard work that you can save and this will be your life insurance also. So people were mixing savings and insurance. So they were buying insurance for that. And that was increasing the savings rate. Then the next time period saw very high savings. And again, you will see that it was quite an interesting factor that this was one of the lowest growth phase of India. 1976 to 1979, one of the lowest growth phase of India, but it sees high savings rate. One was, of course, agricultural income was rising very fast. In a bracket there you write, first point, with the first point in the bracket you write, agricultural income increased at 4% per annum. This is, I'm talking about phase 3. Phase 3, first point. Agricultural income increased at 4% per annum, and due to Operation Flood, Operation Flood was dairying, you know, white revolution. So due to Operation Flood, allied income increased at 7% in this time period. Allied income increased at 7% in this time period. I hope we are understanding that. So agricultural income rising and allied income, especially dairying. Fisheries, poultry, these things were not rising at that time. All right. Allied income meant mainly dairy income, and dairy income because of Operation Flood. All right. We were in the first phase of it. Then I gave, there was, because they were creating demand for it, they were creating skimmed milk, they were creating milk powders, and all that was increasing the life of milk in the market. That created the demand. I will teach you Operation Flood. We'll talk about it. No, last year. Always the percentage you are getting is for the last year, 76. All right. And then I told there is a point, increase in government saving. Now, you know, this was a temporary phase when there was increase in government saving because of a tax amnesty scheme declared. There was a scheme declared that if you declare your undisclosed income or black income, then we will charge a 50% tax on it, and the rest 50% is white. We will not even ask you where you got it from. So this was done in 1977. Another scheme was brought in 1978, which was demonetization of high value notes. All right, now demonetization of high value notes is a pure saving for government. मैं धारक को अदा करने का वचन देता हूं, अब मैं वचन तोड़ता हूं. You know, because that demonetization was not like 2016. In 2016, the government did not actually say that we will not pay back the money. The government said you deposit it in the bank and get back your money. But 1978 demonetization was that we are not giving you back any money for if you have high value denominations like 1,000 rupee notes. All right. So that meant that government could save a lot of money because that money had to be paid by the government now. ये पैसा तो सरकार को देना था आरबीआई के थ्रू. अचानक आपको एक विंडफॉल गेन मिला. और उस जमाने में in those days approximately 200 crore rupees were demonetized. All right, so there was huge savings from those days amount for the government there. So government savings became high with demonetization and with tax amnesty scheme. आप ये दो बात वहां लिख के रख लोगे ताकि बाद में भी ना भूलो. You right? Demonetization and tax amnesty scheme. So the government's savings became higher. And then there was government procuring food, distributing it among people. The poverty alleviation programs had started now. In fact, the food for work program and the free food distribution program in states like Tamil Nadu, states like Maharashtra had already started. So that meant that government was buying food from the market and giving it to the people, which meant now that people didn't have to spend on food. Government was buying food from the market, giving it to the people, so people didn't have to buy their food. That saved some more money for them. All right, increasing savings for the people. There was one more reason about which I told you when I was teaching you India between 66 and 80. The tax laws were favorable to saving. The tax laws said that if you declare a dividend, we will tax you. And if you give salary to the owner of the company, we will tax you. But if you declare savings of the company, then 0% tax. All right, so you just write there, next point. This will be your fifth point. Favorable tax laws to promote savings. Favorable tax laws to promote savings. And you write in that, at the end of this time period, savings had reached 21.8% of GDP. Savings had reached 21.8% of GDP. Then if you see the next time period, that was 80 to 85 period, again, you know, data wise, आप बस वहाँ एक बात लिखो, the phase 4 part, stagnation लिखा मिलेगा आपको. अब वहाँ stagnation के साथ लिख लो, savings in 1985 were again 19%. Savings in 1985 were again 19%. All right. Now, you know, a lot of it was accounting thing. अभी सरकार ने क्या किया? The government allowed that the firms can borrow freely from the market. Earlier, the firms could not borrow. That was one reason why savings. I've given it to you in the structure, so I'm not making you write that. So one reason why savings started dropping, because corporate borrowings were allowed. Earlier, corporate borrowings were not allowed. All right. So that was one reason why savings started dropping. That firms thought, okay, why should we save now? We can borrow from the market. So that was one reason. Another reason was rationalization of tax system in 81-82. Government now started removing those clauses that if you save, then you are exempted from paying any tax. So obviously then a lot of savings which were shown, they may not have actually happened, but a lot of savings which were shown they started declining. This point is not there. You please write it with that phase 4. You write, tax laws were changed. Tax laws were changed. Tax laws were changed to promote expenditure, and therefore savings declined. And then consumerism started rising in India. I'm sure you know, we studied that at this time period, consumer goods were being purchased. More and more consumer goods were now being created. Color television and refrigerators, they were coming to the urban areas in big numbers. And demand for consumer goods like FMCG was going to the rural areas. And that also played its role in reducing savings. Another thing was government expenditure on poverty alleviation, government expenditure on infrastructure development. All that meant government's capacity to save was also low. All right, so that was the low savings phase in this time period. It remained stagnant, actually it came down. All right, many people also suggest that during emergency phase, to please Mrs. Gandhi, higher savings was shown by CSO. All right, that look, things are good. I mean, giving her the right data. But again, we don't have a proof for that, so you cannot write it in your answer sheet. All right? But it is said by many. So post-emergency, again, things started looking back to normal that we could see. All right, I'm not pushing you further than this here today. We will begin from here on Monday, discuss the next few phases, and then investment, and then go further. Thank you. Have a great day. Like the laws which said that if you save, we will not tax you. Those laws were gone. Laws which said that if you are spending on capital goods, you will get the rebate. Export promotion capital goods kind of scheme. You see that those laws. I'll put it on the group, don't worry. Question I'll put on the group, don't worry at all about that. Increasing government savings. Because demonetization meant you had less expenditure to make. It's like you have given money to someone, or you owe money to someone, and that money is now washed out. है ना, मैं धारक को अदा करने का वचन देता हूँ, अब वो थैंक यू है ना, और अब वो वचन वापस तोड़ रहा हूँ. ठीक है. लाइफ स्टॉक कंजम्पशन में मानते हैं. हाँ, चेंज इन लाइफ स्टॉक इज इन्वेस्टमेंट. Change in livestock. No, earnings from livestock will be through a business, dairying, etc. All right, through a business. हाँ, डुअल गैप को ही कम करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. करेक्ट. मैं 1 सेकेंड लूंगा बस. I hope Vikramaditya, you got the saving percentage in phase 3. It was 22.8%. GDP growth was rather showing less correlation with savings, Pranav. The answer to that question is reasons for high GDP growth in 1980. Rise in consumption may not necessarily increase profit, Hardik, if cost of production is high. Crowding out effect is when private investment is reduced due to rise in government expenditure. एक बार फिर से देख लेना उसको अनुपम, वीडियो देखो दोबारा. The demonetization of 1978 और अपने नोट्स को खोलना अनुपम जरूर, ये सारी बातें मैं नोट्स से बता रहा था. Demonetization of 1978 was that it resulted in removing the requirement for government to pay back for the money they had printed, and that meant that they could save money from their expenditure part. हाँ, नहीं, उनके वजह से वाइट इकोनॉमी में भी वैल्यू बढ़ जाती है. अब मैं बताता हूँ क्या होता है. जैसे ये स्मगल होकर आई, बिकी इंडिया में, सस्ती बिक गई, लोगों ने पैसे कमा लिए, अब लोग इस पैसे का क्या करेंगे? और उसका प्राइस बढ़ाना शुरू करेंगे, क्योंकि ये पैसा सरकार ने अकाउंट नहीं किया है. हायर इन्फ्लेशन. ठीक है. ये मुझे पढ़ाने तो तुम्हें फॉरेक्स रिजर्व्स तो समझ पाओगे. ठीक है, देन यू विल गेट इट. वेट, मैं 1 सेकंड ले लेता हूं बस. ठीक है. इलेक्ट्रिसिटी तो रूरल एरिया में अब जाके पहुंची है ना. किस चीज के? नहीं, वो उसी को तो इकोनॉमी का पुअर स्ट्रक्चर कह रहे हैं कि इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर फैसिलिटीज खराब थी तो कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन हायर था। नहीं, सोवियत यूनियन के साथ हमारे टाई अप होते थे, लेकिन अदरवाइज नहीं। सेविंग्स रेट इज 21.8% फॉर थर्ड फेज। Gold rate, gold rates were pretty low comparatively. Yes, people gave birth to children as insurance, Manasvi, it is said that. Saving is seen as a percentage of GDP, but GDP growth did not have an effect on savings growth. That is the point, Pranav. Any contribution of? But we were not exporting much. हमारे एक्सपोर्ट $1.5 billion थे, कुछ था ही नहीं ज्यादा। इसीलिए तो ज्यादा दिखेगा ना, जीडीपी ग्रोथ कम हो गया। सेविंग्स अपॉन जीडीपी इंटू 100 करके तुम सेविंग परसेंटेज निकाल रहे हो। अब जीडीपी फॉल कर गया तो सेम सेविंग भी रहे तो सेविंग रेट हायर दिखेगा ना। ठीक है, give me a day, I'll check with the office if they have any seat available. Actually, we have otherwise closed admissions offline, because you are already more overwhelming. Yes. So we have closed admissions offline. In fact, I had planned to close admissions with around 50-60 people less, but everybody took admission on the same day when we were supposed to close admissions. So hence the number at the moment. But I'll just check because some people have shifted from offline to online. So Abhishek ji was telling me yesterday. So I'll check with him. If that is a possibility, we can give admission. Just confirm it to me with me. Send me a message. By tomorrow, I'll let you know. Because the expenditures, no, government expenditure increased and savings decreased. Because government was now spending more on poverty alleviation. Government was spending more on infrastructure development. So yes, and the tax were not as high. So it was not coming in.
Sir, is it a misconception or a wrong conclusion that the depleting forex would save the value of rupee? Like for that only, we let a poor forex reserve just to get it.
It is to smoothen up the value of rupee decrease.
Is it wrong to say this?
That depletion of foreign exchange is to save the value of rupee. No, it's not wrong.
Sir, in the article it was.
I saw that article. No, so Hindu can publish that. Physical asset. नहीं, वही मैं तुम्हें कह रहा हूँ कि 20% चेंज नहीं। फिजिकल असेट का मतलब ये नहीं है कि तुम्हारे पास वो उनको फर्दर यूज नहीं करोगे, बट यहाँ पर चेंजेस फिजिकल असेट में नहीं थे। उस जमाने में भी बैंक में या गवर्नमेंट पोस्ट ऑफिस में इसमें सेविंग्स होती थी। हमेशा फाइनेंशियल सेविंग असेट के सेविंग को डोमिनेट करेगी, रियल असेट के सेविंग को। ये हमेशा ही होगा। ठीक है, मैं 1 सेकंड लूंगा बस। Fund and non-fund expenditure in what sense, Deepti? Plan or non-plan, do you mean that? Pranav, in that sense, saving as a percentage of GDP can rise or fall. As a percentage of GDP, with GDP in denominator, it can rise or fall. Monday at 2:50 again, we have fixed the timing at 2:50 itself. Fund-based exposure is exposure to a mutual fund or exposure to a financial company. That is fund-based exposure. India is poor, but there are many people who are rich because government savings rose because of high tax collection, Aditya. Possible, provided again you are spending on capital goods creation. No, so remember, private sector doesn't only invest by limited savings per se. Private sectors can also invest by their own savings from the corporate profits that they could have made. और ऐसा नहीं होगा that it will increase suddenly by a large amount, but it will start increasing and then create a positive multiplier effect. Possible. बट वही है ना कि टैक्स रेट बढ़ाने पे पहले से ही टैक्स रेट हाई थे हमारे यहाँ और इनकम लेवल उतनी थी नहीं कि टैक्स बढ़ा सकते हो एक लेवल से ज्यादा. इनकम एक कंस्ट्रेंट था ना इंडिया में. हाँ हाँ ठीक है, वही सर्कुलर फ्लो है कि तुम वेज इंटरेस्ट रेंट प्रॉफिट ऐड करो या टोटल एक्सपेंडिचर ऐड करो, बात बराबर होगी. नहीं, वो तो इनकम मेथड ऑफ कैलकुलेटिंग जीडीपी है. मैं लिख रहा था कि इनकम को यूज कैसे कर सकते हैं. वेलकम. So government savings increased in phase 3 due to demonetization and due to the temporary phase of amnesty tax. Ashu, just see the video once on what I have told you about crowding in. When you create more physical infrastructure, when you create storage capacity and reduce cost of doing business, that is crowding in. No, saving and investment are not used interchangeably in economics, Burhan. Savings implies you are talking about financial savings, money that can be used for further creation, and investment is capital goods purchased. So they are actually not used interchangeably. Be careful always. Because it was all said, but you know, we couldn't do it immediately. So imagine 1956, you say we are doing import substitution, but end of the day, you were still importing from Britain the parts and things, and immediately intermediate goods could not be developed. And that is why the crisis would keep happening. Yeah. Provided it reaches the smaller farmers. Absolutely, that is why. But that happens when it reaches majorly the rich ones. Oh, that's what. No, then it is a social cost. क्योंकि ये लैग के साथ होता है. So if savings and investment remain high for 4-5 years, then again they will take a break because economy will reach I'll teach you that on Monday also. The economy will reach an investment plateau. Then until that capacity is not utilized, firms will not feel incentivized to invest more. For example, I'll explain it on Monday. Just wait till Monday, I will be explaining it. So saving will not have an investment characteristic. Yes. Yes, so if saving can create investment, call it a saving. Yes. No, government borrowing, internal always we mean. Internal borrowings. वैल्यू क्रिएट कर रहे होते हैं उनको इसलिए कैपिटल गेन्स दिलाते हैं हमें. वही मैं तुम्हें कह रहा हूँ कि गोल्ड ज्वेलरी में जो मेकिंग चार्ज तुम्हारा डिस्ट्रॉय होता है, गोल्ड ज्वेलरी में सिर्फ गोल्ड नहीं होता, गोल्ड ज्वेलरी के साथ बहुत सारी और चीज़ें लगी होती हैं जो ऑर्नामेंटेशन के लिए यूज़ होती हैं, तो उनको इसीलिए कंजम्पशन माना जाता है. हो जाता है, इसीलिए जब एग्रीकल्चरल यूज़ के लिए लैंड रखते हो तो उसको सेविंग्स मानते हो. कैपिटल गेन्स होगा, लेकिन इकोनॉमिक्स उसको कंजम्पशन मानता है क्योंकि वो कैपिटल गेन्स इज बिकॉज ऑफ राइज इन प्राइस विद नो रियल वैल्यू राइजिंग. वो तो नॉमिनल वैल्यू बढ़ रहा है ना, रियल लैंड तो एक ही रह गया. ठीक है, बट गोल्ड के केस में हम ये मानते हैं कि वो रियल वैल्यू को पे कर सकता है क्योंकि गोल्ड इज टेकन एज अ हेज अगेंस्ट इन्फ्लेशन. ठीक है, All savings will translate into investment. No, but credit creation adds to money supply, not to savings. Isn't it? Packaging size is reduced? Yes, because what happens is when packaging size gets reduced, then people can afford it more easily. So earlier, those who were not buying it because you were giving a big bottle of 100 rupees, but they had the intention to buy it, but they didn't have the money or didn't have the storage capacity. Now they are willing to buy it because you are offering it for 1 rupee in a sachet. See that ways. I'll just take 1 second. USA has lesser savings rate than India because savings are used for investment. They are not immediately consumed or investment. Savings are lent out, which is used for investment, Manasvi. I'll just take a second. अच्छा नहीं, वो डिपेंड करता है कि तुम्हारी कैपिटल एफिशिएंसी कितनी है. अगर तुम्हारा कैपिटल ज़्यादा एफिशिएंट है, टेक्नोलॉजी बेटर हो गई, वर्कर्स ज़्यादा एफिशिएंट हो गए, तो आईकॉर 2 भी हो सकता है. 4 है इंडिया में अभी भी, क्योंकि हम एफिशिएंट, क्योंकि वर्कर्स भी बढ़ते गए ना, तो कैपिटल का यूसेज भी बढ़ता गया. तो उसके कॉम्प्लेक्स रीजंस हैं, उसमें ले नहीं जाऊंगा, तुम्हें ज़रूरत नहीं है, बट हम ऑलमोस्ट 4 के आसपास रह गए आईकॉर में. Fiscal deficit means high government expenditure. All right, that is high aggregate demand. So inflation. वो मैं तुम्हें सिखाऊंगा, उसमें अभी रुक जाओ, मैं बताऊंगा. अभी सीधा ये बातें ना समझ नहीं पाओगे. अगर इंडिया से ट्रेड करेंगी तो कंसिडर कर लेंगी. रूपी रशिया कर लेगा, ईरान कर लेगा, जिनको डॉलर से वैसे भी दिक्कत है. नहीं, उसकी जरूरत ही नहीं. वो इंडिया और रूपी जब तक इंडिया स्ट्रांग नहीं होगी, रूपी उतना ही ट्रेड करेगा. ठीक है, मैं 1 सेकेंड लूंगा. ऑल राइट, ऑनलाइन आई विल मीट यू ऑन मंडे 2:50. मंडे अगेन. थैंक यू, हैव अ ग्रेट डे.